Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On here at allpointstv.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program here. Come on at 2 o'clock, and we stay around for about an hour. And every second and fourth Mondays, we are preceded by the program that follows us, and that's the program called Satura's Black History Corner that comes on around 3:30 and stays around about 30 minutes. Today is the first Monday, so we're not preceding the program, but want you to stay tuned to that program and all the programs here at the studio, because everyone here, I can tell you from personal experience, and I do come in the studio and watch what they do when they're doing their productions, or run home and watch it after this program is over. And I can tell you that they come in and they put a lot of hours into the studio, and when they go on the air, we've pretty much had a conversation about it before they actually air their programs. But a lot of times invested in it, and want you to know that we're working very hard to win your confidence and to bring you a quality program each time we in fact air anything on this network. Well, there's a lot of things going on, isn't it? And this country, I think we would all have to agree, this country is really in a mess. And we're going to have to straighten some things out over the course of the next, how many months is it before we have the next election in November? We had the Democratic Party debate yesterday here in Flint at the Whiting Auditorium, and I don't know what we're going to do with these politicians. I don't know what we're going to do with these politicians, because they don't get it, and what they're talking about has nothing to do with doing anything other than further exacerbating the problems in this country. And to be honest with you, there are no political solutions to the problems that we're facing. These problems have got to be resolved by we the people. And what they're doing and what they're talking about has nothing to do with the resolution of any of the problems we're facing, not even the major problem that we're having right now in this area, which is a water problem. And I was at a meeting this morning about that situation. And it just seems like with the stories I'm hearing, it's just one nightmare after another. And this is a long-range problem we're talking about, because a lot of people have been contaminated in this city. And some have, according to what I was hearing this morning at one of the meetings I went to, some people have died. And there are all kinds of health problems. I was at the bank last week, and one of the teachers came in that I knew, and we got to talk, and he's telling me about the problems he's having. I guess he lives down at the very beginning of where the Flint River is, and he was telling me that he was bathing in the water, and his skin is constantly agitated. So there is a real health crisis. And we're not talking about just the crisis that we have in the immediate time period. We're talking about some long-range problems from what I'm hearing. And they're telling me that we've had, how many deaths have we had the last couple of weeks? But people are dying from this problem in the city. And then these politicians come in here and they want to make mincemeat out of it politically. And Hillary Clinton calling for the resignation of Snyder, as though Snyder started this problem. It's amazing how these politicians can spin these situations. Now everybody people are suffering in the city, and they come in here and they make political mincemeat out of it and try to get a political benefit and advantage out of it. And nothing is actually being said that's really deliberative enough to be able to start working toward the resolution of this problem. There's a problem in this city, and it's not going to be able to be resolved by talking it into submission, because this problem is a health hazard. This is a long-range, devastating problem that we're facing in the city of Flint. And I went to a meeting this morning, as I said a few minutes ago, and I'll tell you, with what I was hearing in that meeting, it was absolutely frightening, the kinds of health issues that people are dealing with. And I'm talking about people that went into just thinking that they were being told the truth. about the condition of the water. Of course, when I saw, I don't live in the city of Flint. I have property in the city, but when I saw that water at the city council meetings, I don't care what the authorities were saying. When you look at that water, I know how water looks. I think we can pretty much tell when water's yellow. That's not it. That's not it. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. And when people are bathing in that water, coming through those pipes, and that water is discolored or colored yellow and sometimes orange, and that I just don't see how you could use that water for bathing purposes. But people are saying they're having all kinds of skin rashes and things like that. We don't need to be playing into politics with it. This is a serious problem that we're having, and it's going on in other parts of the nation as well. But we have to be clear about this. This problem did not start with Governor Snyder. This is a long-range problem that goes back to a lot of decisions that were made a long time ago, and the failure to replace the infrastructure, and over time, the deterioration of those pipes. The lining that they have, I understand the way the pipes are made, the lining between the lead and the pipe, and then the water going through the pipes. They had a shield there, and that over time was worn out, and that water's now going right through those pipes, picking up that lead on the way to those homes, and now this lead poisoning is the issue. And I hear these self-righteous Democrats, who are some of the biggest hypocrites on the planet, and they're up here talking about their moral outrage. I have to tell you something. Dan Kildee, I mean, these politicians or something. Dan Kildee was so outraged over the situation. He was just acting like it was all about the Republicans. I mean, politicians just can't stop playing politics. And I find them particularly disgusting, because when you have a crisis of this magnitude, what you need to be doing at that point is bringing people together, because the problem has been resolved through a collective effort at this point. But they just can never stop playing politics, and he was so outdone.
You know, I don't want to interject here. When Karen Weaver was just running for mayor, she was planning a protest in Dan Kildee's office here in Flint, right? Mm-hmm. And he got wind of it. He called her and he said, "If you do that, I'll have you arrested." So basically, he was trying to distance himself until he realized the heat was turning on. This guy is just an opportunist. And I'm sorry, I'm going to say that.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like him. I'm sorry, I'm going to put myself out there. He rode in on his uncle's shirt, coattails. I don't think a lot of people realize it's Dale Kildee or Dan Kildee, DK. It's one of the same, and they belong to the same party. That's all that matters.
This guy is an opportunist of the first order, and I had some dealings with him when he was in his other position, and when he was doing the land bank, and also when they would, I went and paid taxes on a piece of land that's next to me, and he took it from me and gave it to one of those developers and claimed that we never bid it on that property. And he knew that was not true, and he was in fact covering for whomever was that person. You know what they do? They get funding for the campaign, and they go to the highest bidder.
Yeah, that's happened.
Politicians.
What you're talking about happened several times. I talked to people around here who bought property or already had paid for, and then they didn't get their, the notification that they was processed into their name, and they went and checked up on it. Oh, you didn't buy that, and they wrote the check. They didn't return the money to them or anything else.
That's the way it is, John. And they very arrogantly wanted me to know that I was out of place in terms of questioning him. But anyway, in this present crisis, he was just so outdone. He said it takes a lot to get him stirred up. But this has really gotten his juices running, that this outrage, as if the Democratic Party, who has run this county, I don't know how long it's been that they run the county, but I can tell you that they have run it ever since I've been here. And John, you've been there longer than I have, but I've been here since '66.
Yeah, see, I can't remember. I know Regal ran as a Republican, Don Regal.
Yeah, Don Regal.
And he didn't get elected, so he switched parties and become a Democrat, and he got elected. I think there's somebody I think they're in the townships and stuff like that, Fenton Township or Grand Blanc. They had a couple Republicans in some kind of board, position. But in the city of Flint, the Republicans abandoned this area back in 1937, 38, during the formation
That's
of the
what I thought. I thought it was back
and they
in
haven't
that
been
time
back
period.
since. So not in any real measure.
Right.
Yeah, Republicans here. I'm not saying that, but they never really have
Had any power.
They haven't even tried anything. They've abandoned the field years ago.
It was known when I came here that if you were a Republican, you didn't have a chance for getting elected in the city. This is a Democratic stronghold, and they can claim anything they want to about this problem being that of the governor, but this was a local problem, and it has been run badly. The city has been run badly. And this is a problem that we've had in many of these cities where the Democrats have run these cities and have not been accountable. And then when the problem finally comes to the surface, people not knowing how long this problem has been festering, and when it finally manifests above the surface, they then blame the parties in power. And it just so happened that now that Rick Snyder is the governor of the state, Republican governor of the state, so they're all doing all this breastfeeding as if this problem starts off in Lansing. This problem starts out where the Democratic Party is. And I'm not making a partisan issue out of it. I would make the same claim if Republicans ran this town and this had occurred in their watch. It would be their fault. I don't play partisan politics. If the party in power has done something that is untoward and should not have been done, and is negligence on their part, then we have to call them on that. And I'm telling you that this was not something that just happened overnight or the last 2 years. This problem has been festering for a while, and now that it's here, everybody is so outraged. The ones that cause it, they want to get their hands off the trigger, and they want to call for, as Ms. Clinton did yesterday in the debate, they're so good about coming in. The Democrats are always the saviors of the urban communities, and yet they overhaul the urban communities. And they wanted to call for Rick Snyder's resignation. I can tell you right now that if we had a Democratic governor and the circumstances were exactly the same, there would be no call for the governor, if he were Democrat, if he was a Democrat, to step down from his position of power. But that's how these politicians play these games.
Well, there's a water problem greater than they say we got going on here. And this is this came out in some blurb on on Facebook, and like Cleveland or Cincinnati, Ohio, it's just as bad, if not worse, than this. And I don't think that's a Republican stronghold. Those cities are. I mean, most urban settings are run by Democrats.
Run by Democrats.
Yeah. So I mean, you're right. I mean, it's just. Another thing is, too, I'd want somebody who screwed it up to actually be on the hook. Him resigning, or anybody resigning in that sense, might actually be able to kind of indemnify them from charges. So I don't know, it could go either way. I don't know how the laws are. Basically, he should be on the spotlight if he did have a role in it. I'm not going to deny that. But the thing is, these Democrats are basically here. They didn't address this issue down the road years ago. They just basically like children. Anybody can get elected. They have no background in any kind of thing whatsoever. And that's fine. That's fine. If you don't have a background, fine. Could be a learning experience. But, you should have the basic common sense. Say, I don't know something about this. Let's bone up on it. Let's read up on it. Let's ask questions. Let's go to experts. Let's get these people in here who are oversight. Because if you're running for office, you'd realize that you have oversight or should have oversight on water, on the basic services, on emergency services. You should ask questions about that. No, they don't. I mean, we got people in there who are basically, I don't know what they do there in the time there. Just when a situation comes up, they vote on it. They don't look at the history. They don't try to look at the possible consequences or nothing. I'm floored by it.
They're politicians, and we have this view, all of it unearned and undeserved, that politicians solve problems, and they have very good PR. In terms of public relations, they don't have a good track record in this country. I just wrote a post on Facebook. I think I wrote that post about 2 days ago, and I wrote this post about the history of politicians in this country, where they've gotten a pass because they do a lot of good things as far as propaganda is concerned, but their track record does not match the propaganda. This country was at one time the greatest country in the world and the freest country in the world. But why was that the case? it was the case because of laissez-faire economics. That's the economy part of it, and also small government was the reason this country was able to manifest its greatness. The people in America are great. Its government is not great. Its politicians are not great. And you can't name one thing. I know people may have thought otherwise. I'm telling you what the truth is here, and that is that you can't name one thing this country has achieved in greatness. It achieved it because of any of the politicians. You can't name it. And I went back to scour, through the record. Sometimes when I read history, I may go over the same history again, but I go over it to read it with one question in mind. I'm going to look and see as I go through some books I read, and just look at one question as I read through the text, and I'm going to be examining through the reading of it this one part of this text to find out one thing and examine it from one standpoint. And what I did in this book right here, as a matter of fact, I think I brought that book. No, I didn't bring it. There's another book by Napolitano. I brought the other book by him. The one I just finished, called "It's Dangerous to Be Right When the Government is Wrong." But the book I read was the book called Theodore and Woodrow. It's a very good book written by Napolitano. He jumps all over the place, but I do like. I mean, he does bring out some very good points. I don't think he's a very disciplined writer, but he's not afraid to say what the record is. I mean, he doesn't let his emotions get the best of him. His partisanship get the best of him, where he'll be saying one thing and then the evidence being something else. So he is honest, but I don't look at him as a scholarly writer. But I read that book again. And when I read it this time, because it was talking about Woodrow Wilson, the 28th president, and the 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt. And I wanted to read it, just to read it to see the politics of it. When I came across politicians' names, I wanted to look at the role they played. And when I looked at people like Horace Gray and some of the others, people that you would not read about in the general textbook, like in a classroom, those persons are not mentioned, or looking at Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was appointed in Horace Gray's place in 1905, and looking at what they were talking about, the politicians were talking about, when they appointed this I don't want to use the word jerk to a member of the Supreme Court, but he was a jerk. The man that wanted to repress people's right to speak in this country, and did it with this nonsense about you can't holler fire in a theater, made it a speech issue rather than a property issue. I mean, the reason you can't holler fire in a theater has nothing to do with hollering fire in a theater because of speech. That's a property issue. You can't open my front door, and you're not a resident in my house, and open my front door and holler in there fire in my house.
Isn't it weird?
It's a property issue.
Oliver Wendell Holmes is actually always cited as being this real conservative jurist, and I see a lot of his stuff and the way he worded stuff. He was very kind of restrictive, so I don't see where he's conservative.
No, he wasn't. He was not. No, they have given him too much credit as if he was some great jurist. Oliver Wendell Holmes hurt America, and was one of those dangerous jurors on the court. I mean, he's not. This is not Antonin Scalia we're talking about here in terms of a very, very strict constructionist or a strict interpretationist of the Constitution. That's not Wendell Holmes. It really shocked me when I went back to read his rulings, and I heard all this thing about how great he was as a jurist and things of that sort. But you go back and read this man's just what he did in that case, because I thought when I read about you can't holler fire in a theater, I thought somebody had hollered fire in a theater and it endangered folks and people would trample over and somebody got hurt, and they were going to restrict that kind of speech because look what they did and look at the outcome of it. And nothing like that was the case. What was before the court at that time was what had happened in World War I, where people were objecting to the war and they were going to jail under Wilson because of it. So they now want to bring the case to the court about a person being put in jail. And so to justify restricting speech when they're home, went to a place where there was not a case of matter having done that, and then said it can be restricted because can you holler fire in a theater, and use that example, which had nothing to do with the court case, and then applied it in this case here and said if you can restrict it in that case, then you can restrict it in this case also. I agree that you can't holler fire in a theater, but it's because I paid. But I tell you why. Because it's a contract, right? I contract with the owner of the theater to see a movie. He contracts with me that he's going to show the movie. The contract makes him bound to do that. I'm bound to pay the ticket and not slipping through the side door. And we have this agreement voluntarily made on each part, and we go in there, and I expect to see this on the screen, the movie. Now, I don't expect somebody to jump out of their seat and start hollering, and now they jump out of the seat and start shooting. That's not the contract. And so it's a property issue. You cannot go on that property and violate the property rights of that owner. Now, we don't like to talk about property rights in this country anymore because that's where we are right now. I mean, this country is a mess. And we have got to understand that we, the people, are going to have to do something about this. And I'm going to talk about some of what we have to do here, because I want to read something to you that happened last week before last, with Bill Kristol. And this is very troublesome. And Milt Romney, that's also very troubling. And I'll give another angle to it as well that hasn't been talked about by anyone else, but this is very troublesome, and it should be very troublesome to black people. Because what Milt Romney is talking about is something that if blacks were not so narrow in their focus, Black Lives Matter, when you say all lives matter, they get mad because they want to be in this mode of looking at an issue and don't want to be looking at it more expansively. But black people had a civil rights movement in this country. And they had a civil rights movement that was basically based upon, and I'm going to say what it was, because what they're saying it was, that's not what it was about at all. This idea that Martin Luther King was trying to correct the American people is nonsense. Dr. Martin Luther King was aiming the civil rights movement at the government in the South, at politicians. And if anybody want to research that, go. I know everybody want to talk about I Have a Dream. I hear it every year. For 50 years, that's all we've been hearing about Dr. King. And when I tell people, I was at this church during Black History Month. They have me there every year. I've been there for the last 20 years. And I think I go there because I don't charge anything. And when they finally gave me a little plaque, I mean, it was, I want to say a little plaque. I'm not talking about small. It was a plaque they gave me, which they didn't have to do that really. I appreciate it, but they didn't have to do that either. I don't charge when I go to these places to speak. And there are some people that do charge. I won't call the names out, but they tell me that I got to start charging because I'm making them look bad. But I was at this church and I was talking about the civil rights movement, and I was saying that everyone thinks that Dr. King was trying to transform America. There was a whole people that was in fact the problem. And I'm from the South, and I can tell you this, that's a misreading of the civil rights movement, and everybody is falling into that mistake. Everyone has made that mistake. Dr. King was trying to move these politicians out of the way, and they've done a very good job of covering their role up. For example, they'll talk about reparations. They'll talk about that, but that's something you can say the whole people. You can say, okay, the whole people gets blamed for that condition. But I tell you what they would not say, Democrats will say, is that Democrats were the ones that the Democratic governments in the South were the ones that in fact maintained that institution. And the Democrats were the ones that in fact kept black people away from the polls in the South. And the Democrats are the ones that organized the Ku Klux Klan, which was designed to keep black people from voting and then terrorize them if they tried to vote. That's not the whole people. That's a Democratic Party. And what I was trying to say at the church there was that we talk about I have a dream, and we all should have dreams. But dreams is not the activity. Dreams is the thought. And all of us have dreams. Some realized and some unrealized. Some are low-level dreams, and some are dreams that make you reach. The dreams that are probably the most profound are the ones you will never meet, because it gives you an aspiration, that a goal that you continue to strive for. Dr. King said, I have a dream. Well, I'll tell you something right now about that dream. You'll never achieve that dream, because every generation must perfect the dream. It'll never be done. So this idea warns me, we have not arrived there, and we are not there yet, and look how bad we are as a country. See, all that's what they do. That's what politicians do. Because they want it to be about us, not about them. But in 1957, how many persons are aware that Dr. King went to Washington at that time period on the 3rd anniversary of Brown v. Board of Education, which was May the 17th, 1954, and the 3rd anniversary of that, Dr. King is in Washington, D.C. in 1957, and Dr. King said on 8 different occasions in that speech called Give Us the Ballot. Give us the ballot, King kept saying, and we would not need the federal government. Why? Because King had discerned the problem was political. That's why King was fighting for the ballot. And when they had a balloting issue passed in 1957 in response to Dr. King. Eisenhower's administration did it. But why didn't it happen at that time period? Because the Democrats were not going to allow blacks to vote in the South, and then all of the accoutrements of that voting would go to the Republican Party that had caused it to occur. That's why they stood in the gap. Johnson, Kennedy, and those persons stood in the gap as members of the Senate at that time. That's the history of it. And nobody knows it better than I do. Okay? So why did it happen in 65 when they repeated the act, and then this time it's signed by Lyndon Baines Johnson? Why? Because in order to get the Democrats to stop discriminating, they have to be the ones to get the credit once the discrimination stops. Nobody's ever said that before. Because everybody, you read a book, you write a book, and you read it, okay, the next guy writes it because this guy sold the book, and this is the premise this guy had. So they come behind him, and he's supposed to be historians, and they come and don't break any new ground and write the same thing the other guy wrote, but just wrote some other stuff in addition to it. But they all have the same claim here. There's not one book yet, and I read pretty much all of them. There's not one book yet that's gotten right what that civil rights movement was about. Not one. Not a single book. And there's some good ones out there. Bearing the Cross is a good book. That's a very good book. And so is Stephen Oates' book, Let the Trumpet Sound. That's a great book. The best of all of them, of all that genre, is a book written by Taylor Branch. He wrote a trilogy. The one that everybody says is classic of the 3 books is Pardon the Waters. That's an excellent book. And Taylor Branch is an excellent writer. One of the great writers on the scene right now. But Taylor Branch doesn't really understand the nature of the civil rights movement, and they all look at all the morality issues as if the American people are immoral. The American people are not immoral. That's the politicians that painted that, and they did it in order to get from behind the 8 ball, because the ones that movement was aimed at was the political elite of this country. Okay, let me bring this to what we're dealing with right now with Genghis Khan, Milt Romney, and Ivan the Terrible. Those people in the Republican Party establishment, because that's who they are. And I call them a name. I don't know if I'm a... I haven't finished this article. When I get back, I'm going to finish it. But I call them a name I don't know if I'm going to use it or not, because I don't like to use those kind of names in my writing. I'm not a profane person, so but they deserve it. I tried to find a word that would be strong enough to say how I feel about them. And I'm certainly not going to say it over the air, but I don't know if I even print it in my post. But and I didn't do as badly as what Trump did and what Marco, that's what Trump called him last Thursday when we had the debate. I mean, they were talking. There was some very vulgar conversations going on there. Some of you have to read through underneath the lines, through the line between the lines, as they say, or read under the surface. But that was really something that you'd have these persons running for president, these low-class politicians, these very disturbed. We don't really realize how disturbed these people are. Go listen to Lou Rockwell from the Mises Institute. Go listen to him. Go listen to some of his tapes. He's a lot more calm than I am, and very deliberative in his thought and his thinking. Very, very smart man. And listen to what he says. I think he'll surprise you. Who comes up with the same conclusion that I came to when I realized that there was a psychosis in back of what I was reading about these politicians. As I said, I went through these books again and began to read just to see what was going on with the politicians. And I could not explain it just through political science. I have a degree in political science. One of my degrees in political science. I have another one in economics. But what I did not discern when I read history, I did not discern. I knew something was missing, but I could not put my finger on it. And what was missing was the psychology aspect to it. I didn't understand the mindset that was in back of what motivated and caused politicians to do what they did. And I think Lord Acton made that mistake, by the way, in the 19th century, when Lord Acton said power corrupts, and power tends to corrupt is what he said. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The sentence doesn't make any sense. Really, if power tends to corrupt, then it only can tend to corrupt absolutely. He talks about it tends, and then he says it does, and that's a contradiction in the language. But I think Lord Acton made a mistake in terms of thinking there was a power that power is really just abstract, just like guns are. I mean, guns don't shoot by themselves, and they want to ban the guns. These silly politicians. These people they're not what you think they are. And I want to get to something that shows that, because this is a laboratory of learning right now that we're into. But it wasn't the whole people. King was trying to back those politicians up, and the politicians were using the Klan as a military wing of the Democratic Party to terrorize blacks and keep them from the polls. Now, they were doing all this other stuff that would have gotten Emmett Till lynched, but it was never about this stuff they were talking about. They were doing that to kind of to hide what was really going on here and tell them about women and all of that, and the sexuality kind of stuff, the stuff they were dealing with on that stage last Thursday when they were talking about what Marco Rubio, Lil Marco. And when you talk about Lil Marco, you have to talk about the size, the diminutiveness of his brain. And they're up there talking about, I couldn't believe these people take that conversation to gutter like that. What they were talking about, the size of somebody's hands, and then Marco says on the campaign trail, getting in the gutter, because that's where they are. I mean, when they're not wearing their mask, you can believe this, that's where they are. As determined by this book right here. And I only mention the name of the book because the name of the book is the name he put on the book. I wouldn't use this on the air, but I would tell you what the name of the book is. The book is written by Larry Klayman, Judicial Watch. And then later on, we left that and then set up another organization called it Freedom Watch. This man has nothing to play with. This is a very serious man, Larry Klayman. His book is called Whores. Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. And what he calls them is that name. And you know something? That's who they are.
Well, P.J. O'Rourke, about 25 years ago, wrote a book, Parliament of Horrors, and he talks about the Congress and Congress, and it's like that's exactly what they are. They They take money for
Pimps and prostitutes.
That's what they are. I mean, that's a great analogy. They wear suits, but that's what they are. I mean, they're not wearing the cheesy, fishnet stockings, but they're suit wearing sociopaths who happen to be very, very prostituted. They're horrible people. I mean,
they are, John. If people understood what they were dealing with, we have 80. I read a report which said we have 88% of the members of Congress up for re-election in 2016. Well, if that would be the case, then really that's the case every 2 years, because the way the elections are set up, every 2 years, all the members of the House up for re-election. You simply have every member of the House standing for re-election because they serve 2-year terms. And then over in the Senate, you have 1/3 of the senators running every 2 years. Sometimes it'll be 34, sometimes it'll be 33. Mostly, it might be every once in a while 30. I don't think it'd be 35, but 33 or 34 senators every year will be up for re-election. So if it's 88% of the members of Congress up for re-election this year, then that's true every year. And that means that if people could discern what's in back of their mask, because they're very well disguised. I mean, when they say things like you can't judge a book by its cover, well, you can't judge a politician by the cover-up. And they are very well disguised in terms of who they are. I mean, we can talk, the language, you can look at the language. You can say career politician. Now, what does that actually mean in terms of the deciphering of that language? Career politician. Let me ask you this question, those of you in the listenership and viewership of allpointstv.com. Is Kim Jong-un a career politician? What about the Castro brothers? Are they career politicians? Okay, fine. What else do you call them? I mean, we understand they're career politicians, right? Because they've been there. The Castro brothers been there ever since '59. And Kim Jong-un is there ever since his daddy died, and no one voted him in there. But he's a career politician, right? And no one can get him out of there. But what else do you call them if they're a career politician? You call them dictators.
Notice that they're on the left, and they always railed. One of the things, if you look historically, about the people on the left said that they wanted to get away from the kings. But when you look at these people are leaning towards socialism and communism, let's face it, did the people of Cuba vote to get Raul instead of Fidel? No. This is the mantle of leadership. It becomes an inherited title.
Picked it up and gave it to his brother.
So I think I was going to write a paper on that. One time I was in college about how the left actually with this elevation of certain groups of people or certain people, they actually capitulate back to being like having a king over them. Basically, what we do, it becomes a cult of personality.
It really is. Yeah. We still have an aristocracy in terms of the political elite. And we're seeing evidence of it right now. We just pay attention to it. We can see that underneath the surface is what we really have in the United States. And they want to make the decisions. And really the reason why they're against Donald Trump is because Donald Trump has come out and had a direct line. He doesn't have any of these big time donors. And he has a direct line from the American people to his campaign, and they are tied together in terms of the populist movement. This is a populist movement. And Donald Trump is right in saying that no matter what he does, I'm not talking he can do anything, but within certain limits, the people don't really care what Donald Trump does. Within limits, of course. We're not talking about doing things that are extremely bad and extremely immoral and things of that sort. Nobody's going to endorse that. But we're talking about the fact that he has to go a long way to, in fact, inflame his supporters because they understand what is on the table? What is at stake here?
I think it's bizarre. You got career politicians and career pundits on the left now denouncing anybody who might want to vote for Trump as being racist, hate-filled. And notice nowadays this whole country has become, if you don't agree with somebody because you see some consequences they might not be seeing, you try to point that out, you're now the And it's from the rap culture thing. You're a hater. I'm so sick of hearing that.
I'm sick of it too.
It's like you see a car heading.
It's not going to work.
You see a car heading over a cliff. You're saying, "Why don't you turn away?" You're a hater.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it going to go? What are you going to go throw yourself on the floor and have a temper tantrum next? I mean,
that's a PR machine again. Because isn't it interesting that the party of the Ku Klux Klan is a party that's making the accusation that everybody else is racist? All this projection that you see here, the American people are finally figuring this stuff out. And they're getting through the maze, because to criticize Obama is racist. To say that he has been a terrible president, which he has been, on all cylinders. This administration will go down in history if the historians can, even if they have to get a CNI dog to see it. This has been one of the worst administrations in American history, and one of the most corrupt. One of the most lawless administrations in history. Nobody is racist in saying that which is true. If you point out something that's true, it doesn't have a color to it or a slant to it, or the truth is never partisan. The truth is the one thing that is not partisan, because only that which is not true can be partisan. Lies are partisan. Because you don't take sides with the truth. The truth is that's why I think that we have taken the high road than some of these others that call themselves conservatives. I don't even consider them a lot of the ones that consider themselves to be conservatives, because the conservative is a person that wants to conserve the virtue. Ultimately, what is being conserved is virtue is being conserved. Everything else everything else can be consumed. Virtue cannot be consumed. I want to be a person that is about the truth. I don't care who is against. Really, I guess that's why I had so much trouble in my career. I only had one friend in the classroom, and I didn't take any prisoners in the principal's office. I was in there a lot. If they would show me that I was wrong, and I don't think they could do that, quite frankly, because I read more than they had read, and I knew more than what they knew. I'm not bragging about that, but that's just the truth. I read all the time, and then when I was teaching, I read all the time, because I was inspired. When I went in the classroom, I was inspired, and I wanted to have more than enough information when I walked in the classroom. So I would read. When I left the classroom and went home, I sat in a chair. I had roommates that couldn't believe it. They go out and socialize and come back. I'm still in that chair and say, I don't believe this. But that's where I was. And I wasn't like that the whole time in my career, but when I was young and had a lot of energy, I was in that chair a lot. I should have framed it. I should have put that chair in the Moss Museum. I did a lot of sitting in that chair. Hours and hours and hours. I don't mean hours and hours. I mean hours and hours and hours. And some more hours in that chair in a single day. But I was just after the truth. And when I knew the truth, I didn't care who was the opposition. And I had to be a little bit insane to be saying things I was saying to the superintendent. But that's where I was. That's where I am now. And I've lost a lot of respect for a lot of people in this thing. Scales have fallen from my eyes. A lot of people I had a lot of respect for. And I thought that they were true to the truth. You say conservatives they're conservatives, and many people interpret that. I did for a while until recently, and probably not so recent. But I took conservative mean that they are for the truth, and I found that not to be the case. I don't call Mark Levine is. I'm disappointed because as I said, I think I said this last week. I said, try to imagine if Donald Trump had been born in Canada. Just try to imagine that. What do you think that these conservatives would say, like Thomas Sowell? I'm very disappointed in Thomas Sowell. And I have to tell you something. I don't have a lot of respect for him. I have some. Now, I'm not an anti-intellectual. It does not mean that I'm going to say that there's nothing that he writes that I will read anymore. I'm not that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about his character. Thomas Sowell does not have any character. That does not mean that he's not brilliant. But he's not a person that has any character. And nor does Mark, nor does Mark Levine. These people don't have any character. Sorry. And I did not think that some weeks and months ago. But I will tell you this. All of a sudden they can't read this document. This is not a large document. This is not 2,000 pages. This is not like what Nancy Pelosi and them try to do up there in Congress, where they try to write it so much, fluff, so that nobody will read what they're doing, and they do it because they want to they're the undercover, politicians. And they write these humongous 2,000 page bills. Why? Because they're hiding in there that they're taking your liberty from you, and they don't want you to see it. So it was kind of like the writings didn't show their morality. It showed their scholarship. But in terms of their morality, there was something different. And all of a sudden they can't read. This is not a large, this is the Constitution, not a large book. In fact, this has in it some of the, has a Declaration of Independence in it, and has some of the court cases. I think 1 or 2 court cases in here as well. And the preface, all the preface in here. I'm just saying, you can see how small the book is. And it has in it the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and that's all it is. This is not 2,000 pages here. So all of a sudden they can't read it. They can't understand it. The language is too complex. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, they can't read it. The language, they can't discern, what it said. Then they want to tell them about the Naturalization Acts of 1790, 1795, 1798. One was in the 1800s. I read all those acts. You can't get that stuff by me because, they can try that. I was in Detroit at a museum yesterday, and they had a speaker down there, and I'll be going back down there again. I'll be doing a presentation down there. But look, it doesn't work with me. And some things work with some other people. It doesn't work with me. And I try to make sure before I go into these particular forums that I've done the research piece. So when they start going up there with this noise, that they're not going to get away with it. I asked the speaker yesterday. This is a side point, and didn't intend to say this, but I was at a program yesterday, and they had this one guy named Rashidi. He worked with Ivan Van Sertima, and they did a lot of collaborative works together. I think I read everything they put out there. And Rashidi was doing a presentation on the Aborigines in Australia, the Tasmanians. You've heard of the Tasmanian devil. Well, there's an animal that's in Australia that you can send. He's like the Wolverine. The animal here in Michigan, our mascot is the Wolverine. That's a very tenacious, dangerous, animal. Well, they got one in Australia, and so they call it the Tasmanian devil. Well, the Tasmanians is also a group in Australia. So they went down there, and he was doing a program on the Tasmanians, who many people thought had been wiped out. They got a mix up with the Karen group, which was in fact decimated and were, I think, exterminated, that group. But the Tasmanians, that is not true about them. So he went down there and he's going to show the physical appearance of the Tasmanians, and he's going to say these are African people and so on and so forth. But yet when he was making his presentation, that whenever he told them they were Africans, they denied that. They said they've always been there in Australia. They're not from that place and so on and so forth. But he's going to tell them that they were. So I got to ask him a question. And what I asked him was, do you now find, having gone to other parts of the world, do you not find that your idea of Pan-Africanism no longer holds water, and you are romantic in terms of making the claim, after running into different people based on your presentation, that they do not see the world through that lens? And he said, it is romantic, but I claim to be a romantic. And I told him that you're not a romantic. What you are is that you're a cultural imperialist. they told you they don't see the world through your lens. And you're not going to stop until you make them see it through your lens, because you are an imperialist and you're not willing to accept the cultural outlook of another group. And because of the physicality and the physical appearance, you want to make them in your image culturally. When they told you, they reject that. And I ran into that all the time. You see, he doesn't even recognize how arrogant he is. And so was Louis Gates when he went over there into Lamu.
That's the difference.
Same thing.
That's the thing I seen in academia, and when I was at college, working at the college, just arrogance that they can label you, they can put you in description, they can put you in categories. And yet, these are the social scientists who say that you should never pigeonhole, stereotype, or put people in categories. Mm-hmm. They're the ones doing. That's what these disciplines do. I mean, and the arrogance when you protest, you try to point out ways. You're the one who's actually been through the experience of this. They want to label you, but. Then when you object to that, and you could give reasons why you're not fit this title, fit this description, they mock you. Like you don't know what you're talking about yourself.
Oh yes, it's really bad now. That in that book you let me read, John, Radical Son by David Horowitz, a very good book. He was real radical. Most of us come through a certain kind of defiance of authority when we're young. We get better at it because getting better at life, the more experience we get, we know more, so we do more. We know better, so we do better. But he talks about when he's on the left, at least when he was in those classrooms, he does make the distinction between how those conservative professors acted in those classrooms to points of disagreement where you're writing papers and they did not agree with the premise of the paper. It was well written, they still gave you the credit for it. And I wrote a number of those papers. And I can tell you that they didn't always agree with the premise, but I write pretty well. I claim to write pretty well. And so anyway, he makes the claim in that book that when the takeover occurred out of some sense of guilt that the conservatives had kept the liberals out and they weren't in the kind of numbers they wanted. They wanted to bring them in and make sure they're being fair and balanced and all these kinds of things, and political correct and all of that. And then they came in and kicked them out. And now you have nothing but an intellectual assault taking place in these classrooms. Anybody raise their hand and has a different point of view. You saw it in that one scene in Back to School starring Rodney Dangerfield, where they had Kennison. In that one scene they had where he asked the student what do they know about Vietnam, and as a student in the classroom, very studious, kind of like, had all the theory in place. And she goes and gives him a long, drawn-out explanation about Vietnam. And he has this look on it. Sam Kinison has this look on his face of, I ain't trying to hear none of this. And so he asked the class, is she right? And before she knows it, he just goes off. I was out there with my rifle in a rice paddy. He goes off about 5 minutes. It's a classic scene. He tears the desk off, throws the desk. He gets so excited. But the point is that if you raise your hand in those classrooms today, and your point of view does not agree with the point of view of the person that's up there in the class that's emoting in front of that classroom, you can be in serious trouble academically. Your grade depends upon your compliance.
They'll probably have you arrested if you totally they probably would have the campus safety officers surround you and escort you off the premises and try to file charges against you. And I guarantee that would happen.
John, yesterday I read on, was it Facebook or was it just on the internet? I read where a student in elementary school said that he did not like Obama. Did you read about that?
I didn't see that.
They sent him home. He was suspended from school.
Well, I got kicked out of day camp center. Day camp, the program they used to have during the summer. Because I was 9 years old. And Nixon was president. Not that Nixon was this sterling person in retrospect, but I had a McGovern supporter this kid was like older than us. He wasn't even supposed to be in the classroom with us, and the teacher, the old coordinator, allowed it. I got in an argument with him, and I got thrown out of the day camp for that day because of that. Yeah.
Where are we going with this? I mean, in terms of where's this country going? And we got the framers didn't even wait to the last of the Bill of Rights. We have the 10 amendments, which they had already promised to put in there if they ratified the Constitution in 1788. They already promised that we would come behind that and that we would, in fact, do things in terms of protecting liberties in this country. But they didn't even wait until they got to the 10th of the amendments recommended to the states to be ratified in 1791. They put that at the very top of the class, so to speak. At the very top of the 10 amendments, they put that one first. I mean, look at the 10 commandments and see which one came first. You can see it's ordered in a certain way. I mean, thou shalt no other God before me. I mean, that's going to be first. If a God is speaking, that's the first blasphemy. Don't do that. So in the Bill of Rights, which also is 10, and you know what? You actually seeing the biblical reference in the Bill of Rights. Nobody's ever said that before. You know what? That really is the reference was really the biblical context. Because they could have ratified more than that. They had 20 of them to start out with. They sent 12 to the states. And the states sent 10 back to them, having ratified them, then rejected the other 2. But why? And they're trying to say that there's no biblical influence in that. And the Bible's trying to tell us right now there's a Muslim influence. I mean, this is insanity. But the very first one was the freedom of speech, etc., etc., etc. And here's a student getting thrown out of school as if we don't have the freedom to speak in this country openly. He didn't shout it out in the classroom, just simply said that that's how he felt. He's suspended from school, a white student in that. And of course, no black's gonna defend that because they're in these cubby holes I was talking about at the beginning of the program. We had a civil rights movement in this country. And anytime you do anything that has to do with voting, blacks should be the first ones to object. And what they're doing right now in terms of what they're calling for, and I'm going to finish this article when I get back to my office, because I'm doing an article on this brokered convention they're calling for, the rum they call for. I'm going to speak against that. And I'm going to speak against it not only because it's morally wrong, but because it's a contradiction of what black people themselves fought for in the civil rights movement. They were fighting for the right to vote. And anytime you have a person standing up and bringing about disenfranchisement, then that is something that black people themselves should be in the forefront of objecting to. But they're not going to do that because they don't have a moral grounding point. And the accusations prove that. And some of them, most of them, the Black Lives Matter group in particular, they need to shut up. Because that's one of the most immoral groups that's out there. Anytime you have a person saying all lives matter and they want to shout you down, that's an immoral group. All lives matter. And not a single one of them better get in my face telling me that only black lives matter. If you say all lives matter, they want to get an attitude about it. You'll have an attitude, and you will get opposition to it. You know, what's that song saying? I won't back down. That's my theme song. He took my idea. I should patent that idea. I'm not gonna back down. I don't back down. If I'm right, I don't know. Something about, I don't know. It's the way I was raised, I guess. I mean, my mom backed me down all the time because I was wrong. I taken the cookies, and my mom told me, "You're gonna back down from that," and I did back down. I was wrong, but when I'm right, I'm not backing down. It's not gonna happen. I have to worry about the consequences later. But when somebody says Black Lives Matter and somebody corrects it and says all lives matter, and they start shouting at them, hey, okay, I gotta get off the air here. John gave me the sign that we are running out of time. Let me make one point before we get off the air here. I want you to read something before next week and before this unfolds. They're calling for a brokered convention. And that's a civil rights issue to me because of the civil rights movement. And here are these politicians again, and they're talking about a brokered convention. But let's talk about what they're really talking about. Let's decipher the language for you. here at the studio, and that is what they're really talking about is disenfranchisement. That's how politicians are. They want the verdict to be in their favor, and when it's not in their verdict, they change the verdict. And if they're talking about a broken convention, they're talking about coming behind the voters who have expressed their will, and they're saying they're going to suborn that will. And if they do that, then we're talking about George Wallace, and we're talking about Ross Barnett, and we're talking about the civil rights movement all over again. And we've got to resist that. Americans have got to stand up against this and say that we're not going to tolerate it. And if you do it, you're not going to have a good day and a good outcome. That's where we are right now. The country's in turmoil, and it's time for us, we the people, to stand up. And you're doing that. I'm very proud of a lot of people in this country at this point. Not these dunderheads out there. Okay, got to get out of here. Want you to, as always, follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dreams, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.